Okay. I think that's just Julie's avatar.
That would appear to just be Julie's avatar. She was here, but now she's not. Anyway, in the absence of Julie, because her computer may well have frozen, I will call this meeting to order. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this, the first anniversary meeting of Global Trainers Online. Woohoo! Celebrations! Yes, even my microphone, which you can see here, is sparkling with shout here. I'm sorry, mine's only a cup of tea and it doesn't really count for celebrations. But so congratulations, everybody. Thank you for coming along. Julie, you're back. So as Sergeant at Arms, I will now ask if you wish to say anything to bring the meeting to order. It's all yours.
Yes. A very special meeting today. Celebrating 1 year anniversary with everyone. And I would like to present now our president for this second year already, Graham Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Sergeant at Arms, for that. And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, hello, whatever time it is, wherever you are. I hope you're having a good time. And if you happen to be watching this on video, well, we were having a good time, even if you weren't here. We wish you were. Please join us next time. Tonight we have a relatively full agenda, actually, which is very pleasing to see since we didn't have that a few days ago. We have a couple of speeches. I'm doing one and Philip is doing one. Mine is from an advanced manual and I believe Philip's is not quite going to complete a CC for him, but getting fairly close. We also have tech tips coming up very shortly. We've got lots of things, so we really should get it underway. I'd like to thank you for coming along. I will now go scrolling around till I find my agenda again. Here it is in the background. And let's move on to the Wordmaster / Grammarian. And who was it said that they would be the Wordmaster Grammarian for today? That was Brian. Brian Dodd, can you please give us a word that we should use today?
Well, I'm not going to be challenging anybody. Let's just use the word celebration. And just imagine yourself back a year ago and a little bit to seeing pictures of a man in a green hat and Michelle and a few other of us that were holding up a big banner on the stage at the Vancouver Convention.
And we celebrated then, we can celebrate again today. Thank you, Brian. So ladies and gentlemen, please try to use the word celebration at some stage during the meeting. And everybody is going to get a chance to speak today. Believe me, that's certainly going to happen. Scott, you're our timekeeper for today. Would you like to indicate what you're doing and how you intend doing it?
I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be doing because I'm celebrating, of course, but I will try to keep you all on the straight and narrow. I'm going to use this thing here for our green, the yellow, and I'm going to use red. So please celebrate as much as you can.
Very, very colourful. Thank you, Scott. And I'll try to, as Toastmaster, to remind you of what the times are going to be for our various events today. Now, one of the things that I like about this club is because we are an online club, because we are also trainers and we are working towards improving our training skills, one of the things that I like to see in this club are the tech tips, which is a training opportunity for a member to provide some technical information about our operation or about something. And I understand today Brian will be looking at hybrid and blended clubs, but also with some tips for those of us who are in 100% online clubs. So with his tech tips for today, and this to be evaluated by, did we end up finding an evaluator for you, Brian?
Mathilde.
Mathilde, if you would provide an evaluation a little later for Brian. Here we go, Brian Dodd with his tech tips for today.
September. Have you heard about the spectacular September showcase? I have, because I've been working with Michelle on developing it. So this is a rehearsal from my speech on Monday about the challenges of hybrid clubs, or blended clubs, as some of us in the audience like to refer to them. I'm only going to cover 3 points. The 3 points are the online portion of the meeting, the on-site portion of the meeting, and then the meeting itself. The reason I'm going to start with the online rather than the on-site, because it has a few things in it that you need to have when you get to the on-site part. First of all, you need a platform. Now, I won't go into the attributes of Zoom because we're all Zooming here right now. However, the one important thing that you need is an internet connection. So where that on-site location is, without that internet connection, it's very difficult to run a hybrid meeting. 2 other things you need. You should do promotion. And we've got the opportunity, book every meeting that you have as an event, either on Facebook or whatever other social media you have. Book an event and advertise that event. Put in there the connection that requires you to get into your platform so you can join the event. Another thing to put in there, you need, because we have an international audience most times, put in what time is it in my location rather than where the meeting is based. And an agenda. For those people that are not in the room, you need to have an agenda that's easy for them to get to. I particularly like the agenda on Free Toast Host because it's there and it's very quick to get to, and it's fairly easy to manipulate and change around in circumstances where you need to change it. The on-site is very important too. You want a room that is not exposed to a lot of noise. You don't want to, if you're in a cafe, I mean, that can be a challenge because you hear all the dishes clacking away and the conversations of the people. That's very difficult to run a meeting from there. And you need the right electronic equipment. I recommend a large TV to display the guests that are visiting you online. And an important thing there beside that is to have a USB mic. In fact, a USB mic is not a bad idea for any of us that are joining online. Some of us are using headphones like Graham and Mathilde and Samir, and others use, like myself, I use the microphone from my webcam in my case. The USB mic, now one tip you need to know is if you have a USB mic, it must be plugged into the same device that has the speakers that the people in the room can hear. Otherwise, you get feedback and hums and different noises going on. So that's important in the room. A fairly good mic in a boardroom setting is probably ideal. You don't need anything more than that unless the meeting is going to be bigger than that. And if you've got a training session where you're using hybrid and online people, then you have to weigh up what equipment you need for a bigger room. One of the challenges we had at Royal Roads from the very beginning is not understanding what the equipment was doing. We had computers there, we had TVs there, we had projectors there, but we didn't understand the connection between all the devices. So that's something you need to learn, and it's not an easy thing. We were very experienced in techie stuff, but it was tough to understand that. Now, coming back to the meeting. So you need both. You need both the on-site and online agenda. You need an online thing where you can update that agenda as roles are being filled, just like Michelle did in today's meeting, or even Mathilde, who went in and added herself at the last minute. That's important. When you print the agenda out, I saw this the other day from a member, he put TBA in there. Don't put anything in there, just leave it blank. And then with a pen, the people in the room can write in there the name of the person who's taking on that role. I recommend a Zoom master. Now, buddies, as the people that seem to have adopted this word Zoom master, and I kind of like that, the way they did that. And the purpose of the Zoom master is to control things like me being able to see the yellow very easily. And that's something done by either the timer themselves or by the Zoom master, who can display that and come up with and solve any little problems that you have there. You should have two in a blended club or a hybrid club. You should have two. You should have one person in the room is responsible, and you can have a person online. Although it's not necessarily always necessary to have a person in the room, as long as one person has the host rights and is responsible for that. It's no good that the Toastmaster of the day be the Zoom master, because there are times when you've got to concentrate on the technology. And the final thing I recommend is recording your speeches. Because there's many times when we as professional speakers or even learning speakers want to get that feedback. Even though we get it from our evaluator, to be able to look at ourselves and evaluate ourselves is so important to both kinds of clubs. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, actually, for a masterful tech tip. And I will be getting that recording and presenting it to a couple of my clubs. One of my clubs, by the way, a hybrid club, sorry, we're not supposed to call them hybrids, a club allowing online membership, has just abandoned becoming a hybrid club because it's just become too difficult for us. But there are a couple of others that I'm still working on, and we will continue to do so. We have two formal presentations today. One is a project from the Competent Communicator Manual, speech number 10, and that's going to be Philip Bendich. Philip, how do I pronounce your name, by the way? I see it written, but I rarely hear it spoken.
Bendai.
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 Bendai. So we don't pronounce the CH, and it's Bendai. All right. So,
well, maybe you don't. Maybe you do in Germany, but in Australia we don't.
Bendai. Terrific. Thank you. Philip is going to be presenting from the Competent Communicator Manual his number 10 speech, which is to inspire the audience. Now, Mr. Timekeeper, the timing for this speech is a little different to most. It is an 8 to 10 minute speech. So if we can have lights for Philip at 8, 9, and 10. It is Project 10, Inspire Your Audience. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Philip Bendai with Wear It Well.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure about you, but when I was just 10 years old, my parents decided to move from one suburb to a much more salubrious suburb. By the time 12 came along, my father had bought me a bright, shiny blue bike. And I used to ride that bike around the whole suburb. But by the time I got to 15, I was peddling drugs. Yes, I know it's hard to believe. This angelic face, how could it possibly be that this angelic face was peddling drugs? And ladies and gentlemen, you've got me wrong. You've got me wrong because, ladies and gentlemen, I wasn't peddling drugs. I was riding my bike to the local chemist where I'd pick up medicines and ointments. And I would use my bike to deliver those to the many nursing homes and old age people's homes that surrounded the beautiful suburb of Strathfield in Sydney, where I live. Now, of all the places that I went to in Strathfield, there was one particular which was my favourite. And I'm sure that if you've lived in Sydney or in Australia, you would know about Arnott's Biscuits. Now, the Arnott's family, as old as they were retired and living in Strathfield, a beautiful, rambling, orangey yellow mansion that sat at the top of the hill in Homebush Road. And it was my favourite place. Do you know why? Can you imagine why it was my favourite place? I'll bet you can't. Because I would always be guaranteed of a glass of milk and an iced Vovo when I went there. And from the Arnott's factory, sort of the Arnott's mansion, I would then ride my bike with my blonde hair flowing in the wind back down the hill to collect another prescription from Thompson's Pharmacy. Now, interestingly enough, my bike was blue, but my eldest brother, his bike was red. Now, it was red because he had the job of delivering telegrams from the local post office. Now, I can see there's some confused looks on your face. A telegram, for instance. Now, let me say, the people under 55, a telegram is what preceded telexes. And I can see there's some confused looks on your face. For those of you under 45, a telex is what preceded facsimiles. And I can see some confused looks on your faces. A facsimile, for those of you under 35, is what preceded emails. Now, I can see there's some confused looks on your face because those of you under 25, well, an email is what preceded text messaging. Well, it wasn't before long before I really started to enjoy my bike riding. But as you can imagine, things got in the way. And it was about, by the time I got to age 40, that I once again took up bike riding in a more serious way. Now, this may be hard to imagine, but I've been riding my bike now for almost 20 years. And I've completed well in excess of 30,000 kilometres on my bike. Now, it's not the same bike, mind you, but it has been an enjoyable experience. I've gone from a flat bar mountain bike to now I've gone into a road bike, which is much faster and much more to my style. The interesting thing was I was riding my old mountain bike along a road in Port Macquarie, not far from where I lived, and I could see a rider off into the distance. Now, that particular rider seemed a little bit older than I was, but he was on a road bike. And I pedalled my darndest to catch up to him. You wouldn't believe it, but by the time I did catch up to him, I was quite out of breath. And as I pulled alongside to him, I could saw that he was actually quite old. I started talking to him as we rode along for a few minutes, and I said, "Why do you ride the road bike that you do?" He says, "Well, it's faster than the thing you're on." I said, "Well, I can see that because you're ahead of me." And I happened to ask him how old he was. He said, "Well, I'm 91 years old." And I thought to myself, 91? How is it possible? And there I was in my early 40s trying to catch up to him. So that was the decision, moment that I decided that a road bike is for me. And I've been on a run now in my late 50s. I've ridden a lot of bikes. One of the most challenging things that I have done on a bike to use it for good purposes, you know, doing some good for bike riding. In Sydney, there is a ride which is called the Ride. About 85 to 90 kilometres from Sydney
I believe we have just lost Philip. I'm hoping he'll be coming back in a moment, but am I still here?
You're still there.
Yes, you're
Right, yep.
definitely there.
Yep. All right. So when...
Wait, I just heard him, I think.
Yes, I'm here.
You're back. All right.
Yes,
Sorry,
I am.
we got to the point where you were talking about the ride around Sydney.
Yes, it's from Sydney to Wollongong, and you think it's heading south, mostly downhill, but it's not hill at all. There's uphill as everything. And for 6 years, it's a ride to Charity Multiple Sclerosis Society, and I was very proud to be in the top 20 fundraisers one year. And as you can imagine, most of the people have cycling gear. Now, a couple of meetings ago, we were there with our helmets on, but I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm stripping for multiple sclerosis. And I'm not going to embarrass myself by showing you my other Lycra gear, but the important thing is, ladies and gentlemen, that if you are going to exercise, it's very important to do it for a good cause. Now, there's lots of good causes. People walk for fundraising, they run for fundraising, they cycle for fundraising, they do all sorts of things. In Sydney, there's a thing called Read for MS. So people read books. And when my daughter was learning to read, I was one of the proudest people to be able to sponsor her. So here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, if you are offered the opportunity to sponsor someone who's doing some exercise for a good cause, I want you to open your wallet, take out your credit card or cash, whatever you have, and make sure that person is inspired by your actions. Because without that inspiration, you may think we just love cycling and wearing stretch Lycra for the fun of it. Well, it is fun for sure, but the important thing is that we raise lots of money. Because this particular shirt, for instance, isn't for MS. This particular shirt, I rode 200 kilometres over 2 days for a cancer building that was being built in Sydney. The Chris O'Brien Lifehouse. If you know Chris O'Brien, well, funny enough, he actually died from cancer himself. He was the #1 specialist in brain cancer in Australia, and that's exactly what he died of. He died of brain cancer. So, ladies and gentlemen, my inspiration, if you like, is not the pain that goes with cycling. It's not the love of wearing stretch Lycra. It is seeing people who I know and who care about me putting their hand in their pocket, pulling out their cash or their credit card, and putting together money which is going to help support a number of other people. A very good friend of mine, Rick Haynes, recently passed away from cancer. And one of the last things he said to me was, "Thank you for your support of the Chris O'Brien Lifehouse, because when I visited there, it was such a magnificent building." So the effort that I put in to raise money for that has gone to help support people I know and love, and the same people for you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much. Inspiring, which is the intent of the speech, but also encouraging. And if you have a charity ride coming up, and I believe I heard you mention one, make sure you put the details into the group chat so that we can find your support and become supporters of you. Thank you. That speech will be evaluated a little later by Summer, but we have a second speech now, and that will be presented by me, Graham Cairns. Yes, in fact, I will be presenting a speech from the technical... Let me grab the manual here. Here we go. The manual is the technical presentation speech. It's one of the advanced manuals. This is a longer presentation than has been the case in the past. This is a 10 to 15 minute speech. So if I can have lights at say 10, 12 and 15, Scott, that would be excellent. The purpose of this is to present a speech which provides technical information and uses the internet to do so. In fact, I'll read from the objectives: to understand the nature and process of a technical presentation, arrange pre-meeting communication via email, create a post-meeting website for further dissemination of information, supporting enhancing the verbal presentation, and to use a desktop computer, Microsoft Word, web browser, simple graphics program for photos and other images, Microsoft PowerPoint, all those sorts of things. That's the objectives. I'm going to ignore a lot of them because we don't need to do that. We know how this works. That's what we do here. But what I am going to be doing is presenting a workshop on podcasting. And so for a time of 10 to 15 minutes with podcasting tips for podcasting tools and tips for trainers, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Graham Cairns. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. What a wonderful introduction, and what a fabulous Toastmaster you are too, but we all know that. Ladies and gentlemen, a question before I begin. Who here has created a podcast either for Toastmasters or for perhaps your training or just for fun? Anybody? Good. Philip has, Michelle has. We've got a few hands going up. Who here is going to create a podcast because it is a level 4 project in Pathways? It's an elective across all 10 paths. You can create a podcast. Anyone given a thought to creating a podcast? Well, before you begin, you have to answer this question. What are the most important things that you need before you begin a podcast? And you can either speak or put it into the chat box. I'm happy to see that. But can I ask you, what are the most important things that you need to create a podcast? Anybody?
A microphone.
A microphone, says Brian. Anybody else?
A recording device.
A recording device, says Scott. Yes. So probably a computer, perhaps a dedicated recorder. Yes, Julie?
A recorder.
Sorry, a recorder, Julie? Yes.
Content.
Samir?
Compelling content.
Yes.
Content. Content comes before it all.
Yes.
You don't have to have a great voice. You don't have to have a great microphone. You don't have to have a state-of-the-art studio. You don't even have to have a state-of-the-art PC. What you need before everything else is you have to have content. Because quite frankly, I could sit and talk for 10 minutes because I like the sound of my own voice. I mean, you know, who here likes the sound of their own voice? Anybody? All right, let's be honest. Who here hates the sound of their own voice? You've heard it on a recording. You think, oh, I can't sound like that, can I? Yeah. Well, you know how you sound when it comes back to you off a tape recorder? You want the good news or the bad news? It's the same news. That's how everybody else hears you. The way that you sound when it comes back off a tape, that's how the rest of the world hears you. There's a reason for that, by the way. And that's because when you normally hear your voice because you are speaking, you're hearing it bouncing back off the walls and coming back toward you. That's how we all hear sound. It travels through the air and we hear it on our ears. But we also hear it from inside our heads. And because we hear the noise coming from inside as well as from outside, our voice sounds different to us when we are speaking to when we are listening to it from a separate source. So if you hear your voice on a tape recorder and you think, oh, geez, that sounds terrible. Well, I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do about it. That's how your voice sounds. Learn to deal. Quite frankly, the voice is the least important part of a podcast. I mean, as I say, I quite like the sound of my own voice, but I'm a radio announcer. I train myself to listen to my voice, to get it to sound the way that I want to. But the voice isn't important. And no matter how good my voice is, unless I'm one of those guys who's got one of those voices, you know, in a world where there is a voice that you just want to listen. Yeah, unless you've got one of those voices, nobody's going to listen to you for 15 minutes unless you've got something to say. So the first thing that you need for a podcast is you need an idea. The second thing I think is useful is value adding in what you're saying. So you've not only got to have an idea of what you want to say, but you've got to give your audience some value. Because anyone here find they've got, I don't know, an extra half, 3/4 of an hour every day that they've got no use for? You've got this extra half an hour that's completely spare. You couldn't do something else with it? I didn't think so. Time is our most valuable resource. And if you're asking somebody to commit to listening to you for 10, 15, 30 minutes, then you've got to give them something that is worth their time to do so. Sorry, Adi, I'm not answering the phone now. So, once you've got an idea, and once you've got some valuable content to give them, then you need to start to look at the technical material that we spoke about. Now, those of you who have done podcasts, who said they'd done a podcast? Show of hands again. Okay, Julie, Brian. We'll start with Brian first, and then Julie, and then Philip. Brian, what did you use to create your podcast?
Well, that was years ago that I was doing podcasts. I had a great big RCA tape recorder, one of those huge things that was the size of the size of a suitcase. And, it had a pretty good mic, and then I would just record the stuff on there, and I had a plan on what I was going to say and everything.
Yep. So you had
get broadcast anywhere because that was before the internet.
Yep, but you would record it on Open Reel, for example. So you had a specialist recording module of some sort. Julie, what did you use to record your podcasts with?
I had a tiny Philip recorder, which I had on my hand or in my pocket when I performed. So I have it recorded, my stories usually, or my stand-up comedy.
So, a dictaphone or a digital version of a small pocket recorder. Yep. Philip, what did you use?
The first thing I used was a little voice recorder that I did some interviews with, and then I've moved it up to some thing called GoToMeeting, and I've done some Zooms as well. So I'm using both.
All right, yeah. So you're actually doing vodcasts as well as podcasts. Vodcasts, the difference between vodcasts and podcasts is the letter V. No, literally, it's video podcasts versus podcasts. Oh, I should have done this first. Does everyone know where the word podcast comes from? No? All right. Do you remember? We were laughing before about telexes coming before telegrams. Somebody has an iPod in their hand. Samir has an iPod. An iPod was the first MP3 player to achieve mass market penetration. It was the Apple iPod. It contained a squillion songs, and you could listen to them wherever you were. So that's where the pod from podcast comes from. The cast is broadcast. The idea was that you could record an MP3 or other audio broadcast and make that available to people to carry around in their pockets, in their iPods, and they became podcasts. So what it's done is it's democratized broadcasting. It means that you can, from a spare room or even from your kitchen, create your very own broadcast. You don't need a radio station to broadcast it anymore. You can send it out on the internet. People can download it to their iPods or the modern equivalent thereof, which is, of course, the standard smartphone that we all carry with us, and they can listen to you wherever you like. So that's where the word podcast came from. A vodcast with a V is merely a video version of the podcast. So those are the various ways that people have done it. Let me tell you what I've used to create my podcasts. The first is, as Brian suggested, you need a microphone. Now, there's a very pretty picture of a microphone over my shoulder, which looks remarkably like the microphone which I use to create my podcast. This actually is a Yeti Pro microphone. They're not cheap, I have to tell you. I'll talk about that in a moment. This particular one, though, is a beautiful microphone for podcasting because it has really good sound. But on the back, you'll see it has multiple different forms of input. No, you actually can't see it, but basically most microphones are what you call cardioid. That is, you speak into them and they cut out most of the noise from the sides and from behind because they don't want the noise from behind or from the sides. They only want the noise from the front. So you have this cardioid pattern which picks up from just the front of the microphone. What the Yeti Pro or the Yeti does is it has multiple inputs so that you can have cardioid just from the front. You can have bi-directional so that I can be sitting in the front of the microphone. Somebody can be sitting on the other side of the table and speaking into the same microphone. You don't need two mics. If you want stereo sound, then you can have stereo sound, or, and this is what I use it for in terms of online meetings, you have an omnidirectional setting as well, which means that it will pick up in that complete 360-degree circle. Well, actually in 720 degrees, because it also goes that way, but there's nobody sitting on the ceiling talking, so we don't care about them. That's why I use the Yeti Pro. But I have to tell you, it's not a cheap microphone. There is a much cheaper version of that, which is available. I will be providing a link in the chat box, but in the meantime, I will also tell you what it is now. If you go to cairnscommunications.com, that's C-A-I-R-N-S, communications.com, there will be a blog post there which is specifically entitled Tools for Podcasts. So I've pinned it to the top of my front page. So all of the information that I'm about to give you will be included in that post. There's also a chance for you to react to that, to send me a message, to send me a question, and I would love us to have an ongoing discussion there. But, so the microphone, there are a variety of microphones you can use. There's that particular one, which, as I say, is probably about $380. There's a cheaper version of that, which is about half that price. There are specific podcast microphones, but you don't really need them. For the basic podcast that most people do, all you need is your laptop, which has a microphone built in. Or if you don't have a laptop, your mobile phone has a perfectly good microphone built into it as well. So that's to record. To edit the software, there are lots of options. You can spend thousands of dollars by going for something like Adobe Audition, which used to be called Cool Edit Pro, but was taken over by Adobe a few years ago. And they now charge, I don't know, $30 a month or thereabouts for your subscription, unless you happen to work for a university and get a cheap version. Not that I would ever do that. So there's that. That's the expensive way of doing it. There's also a completely free editing software called Audacity, A-U-D-A-C-I-T-Y. Now, Audacity is free, and normally you get what you pay for, but in the case of Audacity, it works really, really well. Oh, sure, it won't do the all singing, all dancing stuff that top-end music programs will do, but you don't need those for a podcast. All you need is to be able to edit your bits, your guests' bits, edit them together, put a bit of music on the beginning. Audacity is free, and it is probably the most widely used bit of software for creating a podcast. And then thirdly, you have to have your podcast hosted somewhere, because you can create your podcast, but unless you put it somewhere for people to be able to download it, you might as well be the tree that's fallen over in the forest and that nobody cares because, you know, you're a fallen tree, and you don't want to be a fallen tree. You want to be out there shouting to the world. So again, I have put up some links, but quite frankly, the easiest way of uploading your podcast so that people can access it is to use something like SoundCloud, which is a free service. There is a paid version of it as well, but SoundCloud will give you a free place to host it. There's an Australian one called Whooshka, W-H-O-O-S-H-K-A-A. You've got to note the double A on the end. Whooshka, which will host your podcast for free in return for placing ads at the beginning and end of your podcasts. yeah, I got no great objection to that. It's free, it works. So all of those details are available. If you go to cairnscommunications.com/2018, but anyway, just go to cairnscommunications.com. It's the first link. I've pinned it to the top, and I'd really like to ask you to read that, to check it out, and to respond to me. I'd like to get us getting a discussion going amongst all of us on best practice for using podcasts, particularly for training. You see, we've all got great little hints and tips that we'd like to share with lots of people. We don't want to give all of our trade secrets away. We're hoping to make money out of training, I'm assuming, but you can use podcasts as a great resource for getting new business by putting together short podcasts just with some of your hints and tips, some of your training tips, and inviting your listeners to then contact you to take on the full workshops which you offer. So that's a very basic introduction to podcasting for trainers. I think that it is a great resource for all of us, and I'm hoping that the page that I've set up at cairnscommunications.com, which by the way is my website, will give us a chance to start a discussion together. And with that, I hand back to the Toastmaster. Oh, hello. Well done there, Mr. Cairns. A fabulous presentation there, but we would only expect that to be fabulous from you. All right, time now for training topics. One of the things, again, about this club is that we have table topics, but they are not just table topics in the traditional Toastmaster sense. These are training topics where we are specifically focused on training questions. And to present the training topics section for today, please welcome Michelle Alba-Lim.
Thank you. And I was busy scribbling notes there. We need to have a one-on-one and all of those, but Audacity, I just picked that up. Thank you so much. My brain is still spinning from that. And that segues directly into our training topics, where, because our theme is celebration, and because we are trainers, the questions are focused towards those. So, if you are a trainer, answer this question as a trainer. If you have not been a trainer yet, and you can answer this as a participant. The question is, how would you celebrate within a training session? How would you celebrate an achievement by one of your participants? And give a specific example, if you can, of an achievement and how you would celebrate it so that everybody, not just the participant, would be edified and inspired. Who would like to answer that? Let me see who would. Everybody has a role. That means everybody can respond. So just unmute yourself. Yes, Mathilde.
I was a participant once in a training course, and at the end of our training we all had a testing, but we didn't call it testing, we called it festival, because it was celebration of the knowledge we were gaining. And part of this, after everyone was tested in front of the complete entire group, was that we had a little celebration where we were all given our certificates. Everyone had to come up and you were shaking hands with the trainer, but then the complete audience, the whole group was also cheering you up, and it was a phenomenal experience to get in front there and have all those people with you. And we were kind of doing a little dance for everyone, so it was really fun to celebrate and get into action. You know, it was not like sitting down and just clapping. It was really, everyone was involved at all stages of this celebration. Otherwise, you could think it takes so long if 20 people get in front. But with that, it was so much fun. And afterwards, we had some food together, and it was just mingling. So I like this kind of celebrating everyone and the success of people. Back to you, Ms. Table Topic.
Thank you. I wrote that down. Festival. Wasn't that amazing? Would you not want to be in a training session where achievements are celebrated as a festival, as a party, a fiesta? That is awesome. Now let us flip the coin. Sometimes trainees, participants, learners do not all progress at the same rate. So if you are the trainer, answer this as a trainer. If you're a participant, answer this as a participant. How would you deal with a situation where everybody else is achieving and they're ready to celebrate their achievements, but you have one or two who are lagging behind? Yeah, I see Philip raising his hand, and then I also had a little whisper that there are two members of our group right now, Samir and Julian, who don't have any other roles. So Philip, I will keep you on the back burner. Would either Julian or Samir want to respond to that question? Julian has unmuted himself. Let us welcome Julian.
First of all, I would like to share my thoughts with all the audience, all the trainees, that all of us will live a process in any kind of learning path. We don't need to go at the same time. Sometimes we need support from others. So if you are in there taking that training, that's okay. It's a way. It's an option to celebrate. Why? Because you are there. You move from your comfort zone and come here to take the topic or get exposed, no matter what happened. And if you need some support, here we are, all of us, to support you. Whatever you need, time, just discuss the topic, something else that you need to work on, just ask for help. So in the case that you get you complete the path, it's okay, it's fine, it's great to celebrate. But if you need help, just ask for it. And we're going to take you to complete the path. And because we need to, as a community, we need to celebrate. That's my opinion, Madam Master.
Thank you. Thank you. I would love to be in that group or that class or that workshop with Julian, because you are so sensitive to the feelings of everybody, including those who are not learning as fast. That's awesome. And the third question, and this could be our guest Samir, who doesn't have a role, or it could go to, but he's already smiling, so I think Samir would like to answer this question. Tell us about your favorite memento or your physical, either a souvenir or reminder of an achievement that you celebrated and you still go back to and celebrate. Samir, tell us about it.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle, for that. I got one of these glass mementos, a training achievement from the year that I was an area director. But this one calls to something that was a celebration of going kind of above and beyond that I like to go back to. This is actually for a district director award. Even though I was an area director, we had a case where our division director had a personal crisis and was not available, and we could not take the steps necessary to switch things around. So I didn't formally assume the office, but I assumed the responsibilities, and this was the only way the district could see to recognize that achievement, and I was very moved by that. I had really wanted to take on the role and get the title, but the recognition and the celebration meant more to me than the title. It reminds me that we're in a service organization and that we're there to serve our members. And when we see an opportunity to help or to step in where there's a need, then it's something worth celebrating. And that moved me immensely. Thank you, Training Topics Master.
Awesome. I always love the answers. I never really know what to expect, and I always learn something. And I'm sure for the final question, and he's still unmuted, so I think he's really ready to answer. This will be for Philip. And now, finally, I know how to pronounce his last name, Bendai, without the CH. Okay, I apologize. I always pronounce it with the CH before. So, Philip, if you had your way, what would be an award or a recognition that you would give to a trainee or a learner that you feel would be really special and unique? Not the usual best attendance, best whatever, but what award would you give? What recognition would you give to celebrate a learner or a trainee? Over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Training Topics Master. It's interesting that on those occasions when I've done training and I find an opportunity to recognise that, it's not particularly easy because you don't want to single people out as much. And certainly in Australia, people who get singled out get a little fearful that they're being singled out. And there was an occasion I had this recently. I had one lady in a training session and she was just so fearful of the topic that we were being trained in. I felt as though she was almost going to faint. I was surprised when she told me how fearful she was that she was even in the course to start with, but there she was. And one thing that she mentioned to me took me back and helped me to connect with her was that she had been in the British Army and she had told in a story that she was telling of the fears that she had faced being a soldier in the British Army. And I basically said to her, so, well, let's compare your experience in the British Army to what we're doing here. So what would you rather do? And I brought her to the front of the class to do this. And she said, well, I think I'd rather be in Afghanistan in the army. And of course, that just blew me away. I found, really talking in front of, 8 to 10 colleagues was more fearful than being in Afghanistan. I just couldn't believe it. So once we all had, because what her peers did was they said that, no, there's no way that could be, less fearful than what we're doing here. So once she had been given that support from her peers, it really made a big difference. And as a result of that, we celebrated with her and she finished the course and she was by far the most celebrated participant because of that. Thank you.
I just had another quick whisper. I apologize. I just had another quick whisper. Mufid, you are here and would you like to answer? I know that the Training Topics time is running out, but Mr. Timer, do we have time for one quick question? Yes? And so Mufid, because I did not notice that you don't have a role, would you like to answer just any of those 4 questions? Your choice. Either how would you celebrate an achievement? How would you deal with a failure? What's your favorite memento from achievement? Or what would be an award that you would give? Any of those 4, choose one.
Thank you, Trained Tips Master. In fact, I'll choose number 3, I would say. If I could show you, I have a large cabinet here full of prizes, I would call, but I would say the most dear to me, the dearest to me is what you can see here. That was given to me in 2008 and it was totally unexpected. And if you can read here, I was called the ambassador of RTM. Simply because I was attending Toastmasters meetings all over the Middle East, I would say. I was traveling a lot, and wherever I went, I tried to find a club and attend a meeting or 2 every week. So at that time, my mentor and the president of the club at that time decided to give me this very valuable to me sign of achievement. It was being called the Toastmasters, Riyadh Toastmasters Club, and I think it was never given to anybody else after that even. So that was one of the rarest things to my heart. That's why I keep it all the time very close to me, apart from the other ones. So sometimes maybe you have to choose one or two favorite monuments that you can keep in mind and you never forget. That's very dear to the heart. Thank you, Michelle.
Wow, thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Timer, for extending our time. I always enjoy doing training topics. And now it is my pleasure to hand control back to our Toastmaster. Let's welcome Graham back.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for doing a fabulous job there. And thank you to all of the participants for taking part in training topics. Everything that happens in Toastmasters, of course, is evaluated. We all know this because we're all Toastmasters, but I feel the need to say this occasionally because I sometimes think that we forget that the keystone to Toastmasters, the thing which holds this organization together more than anything else, is the feedback that we provide each other and the way that we learn, not only as participants being evaluated, not only as evaluators giving the feedback, but also observing the feedback as well. So I'm always excited to see evaluations, and our first evaluator, or at least evaluation facilitator, is Summer. And Summer, you'll be facilitating the evaluation for Philip's speech this evening. So if you would like to take it, it's all yours.
Thank you, Toastmaster Graham. Hello, Toastmasters. Good day. So our Toastmaster, our speaker today, he was delivering his 10th speech from the Counter Communicator, and it was about inspiring the audience. And I would like to know from you first, whether you've been inspired or not. Yes, exactly. And before we start, Toastmaster Philip actually, he was speaking about his story. And the message was, if you are doing exercise, do it for a good cause, with cash. And I would like to know from you, your input, your feedback about the speech and Toastmasters Philip's delivery. Who would like to start first? Yes,
If I may, I'm going to do this just because I wanted to say this to Philip, and I was going to a little later. I was inspired by that speech. I was almost inspired enough to go and grab one of my jerseys and find a ride that I can go and raise money for. So well done, Philip, on inspiring. I always like, particularly with with an inspirational speech, for there to be a direct call to action at the end. And I would love to have known where I could support you. So, and I think I mentioned that. So that would be my one takeaway for this, that if you had given us a direct call to action, we might already have our credit cards out.
Okay, thank you, Toastmaster Graham. I would like also to give his feedback. Toastmaster Julie.
I love the story you told us from the childhood to now and all along. And it was really an interesting personal story. We couldn't stop. If it was a podcast, we would have listened to the end.
Yeah, it was a great story. Toastmaster Brian, and then Toastmaster Samir.
Yes, I'm going to give him actually my grammarian feedback because I won't have time in my normal report. I loved his bright, shining blue bike. A great expression. Mine is blue, although it's not shining at the moment because it's got dust on it. And the expression that he had, the blonde hair blowing in the wind, that could be a song, couldn't it? And then the progression between the telegram and the fax and the email and the text. But however, he could have added one. But Pinterest is how the iGeneration communicate today. Great description of words.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Really, I like also the expressions and how he delivered the idea, especially when he took us from the telegram to the text messages. We understood from all our generations here, we understood what he means. Yeah. Toastmaster Samir?
Thank you, Samar. I want to continue on from some of Brian's feedback. I loved the wordplay that was involved. That I shifted to peddling drugs, and I had to hear it. Oh, it's peddling drugs, not peddling drugs. I loved that. That was wonderful. I like the call to action, and I thought there was another opportunity to talk about generations there. So not just the credit cards, but for those new generations, you might use whatever online payment means you've got as well. Again, a clear call to action might have been there, but I, for one, am inspired to take my desire to improve my health by raising money for a good cause in combination. Two birds with one stone gives me more motivation. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Toastmaster Samir, for your feedback. Toastmaster Philip, actually, I was inspired with your story, with your speech and message. And actually, your message is a new to me. That usually we have this, you have these messages of keep it up, go on, that kind of messages. But your message was clear and this was unique and new. Just when you do an exercise, do it for a good cause. And this relates to each one of us, because each one of us here do exercise in some way or another. And do it related to a good cause. That's a good way. The only thing that I would like to suggest here, that if you could just give us a hint about the message at the beginning of the speech, so we can know where are you going with us, or where are you taking us through your nice story, your long story, and which actually was an attracting story. This is the only thing that I suggest on you. I like the call to action. It was direct, and also using the words and twisting the words. I like this also. This made us, through the speech, being attracted to your speech. Thank you so much, Toastmaster Philip. Back to you.
Thank you, Sama. That was a fabulously well facilitated evaluation there. Now, to facilitate an evaluation of my podcasting presentation, I'll hand it to Philip. It's all yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, Mr. Facilitator, and folks. I must admit that I've been inspired by your words, so I appreciate that. And in doing so, it's now my opportunity to bring together the thoughts of the members who listened to Graham's speech as well, and to give him some feedback. And I want to start off this because when Graham and I had communicated about this speech, particularly with casting, and so many opportunities for us, and this is one of the great things that I like. Technical presentations sometimes can be quite broad and also can be quite specific, and I think what Graham did, he used what I would call the inverted triangle, and he took the wide triangle at the top and then he brought it down. As the speech progressed, he really gave us a focus for what we were looking at there. So the inverted triangle is the approach or the structure that I saw that Graham did. Now, I'm going to look at some specific things, but I would like some feedback from the people who haven't given some feedback yet. And perhaps, yes, Michelle, if you could jump in there. Thank you.
Yes. What I really liked about Graham's speech was it was so highly informative. I learned things that I didn't know. For one thing, I didn't know that you could get free software. So that was very informative. And then I also liked the humor, the way that he presented it with a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Just, yes. I loved it. So, yeah, fantastic. I have several other things, but I'm sure the others have comments as well.
Yeah, look, that's very important. One of the things that I really liked about it is how Graham talked about if you're going to do a podcast, add value. And this was a perfect example of adding value to a podcast. So, Graham, you really showed us what you were talking about and and I've done lots of these, and I still got some great value. So who else would like to add some comments there? Scott, would you like to have, maybe not right now, but think about something in a moment? Yeah? All right. Yes, Julian. Thank you.
Yes, Graham, I invite you to get in front of the camera because I see you a little below the screen, like here. So I think it's better, like, for example, I can see Philippe or Michelle in order to see you more your face and see more your eyes. I appreciate it. And actually, the idea, add value, and all the resources that you shared was amazing. Thank you so much, Graham.
Yes. I think Graham mentioned it specifically that he likes the sound of his own voice, so maybe he thinks he has a great face for radio. Yes, he does. All right. Scott, would you like to add something there?
Certainly. Thank you, Philip. I really enjoyed Graham's talk on podcasting. It's something that I've always been interested in, so this speech has just come at the right time. I really liked his style, how he went through and explained everything. He had the audience on side, so he'd ask questions which involved us all. So, and we responded in different ways, and he got out which was the best. So the content's obviously the best, and which is excellent. And then he went through the technical aspects and gave us a clear, definitive thing of the microphone to use Audacity. I've used Audacity before, so I knew exactly what he was going on about. So, but I really enjoyed it. It was well structured and gave us a really good rundown of what podcasting is all about. And I think we're so much more informed about podcasting due to Graham's speech. So,
yep.
Well done to Graham. It was well structured, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I might, because we've got yellow, Julie, I might just finish it up now. I really like the way that Graham engaged us all in the beginning by asking us what's the most important thing. And whenever you do that, there is always going to be people that answer the wrong question. So I think Graham did it in a nice way. He's got such a smile in his voice. He used some interesting words, democratized. I'd never really heard that one before that. He added value, as I mentioned before, and he used his voice very effectively. And if you're doing a podcast, he really showed us how you can use your voice by the variety that he talked through. He was very compelling content. I particularly liked how he talked about not only the microphone that was sitting in his background, but he showed us that. And, you know, it's easy to see something, but we have it there. He was well prepared. There's no question about that. So, Graham, congratulations once. I think you really added value to your members of this club this afternoon. And I encourage you all to take that information and get out and do some podcasting. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions here this afternoon. And if you've got any other comments, please feel free to add them into the Zoom chat so that I can read them later. Time now for another evaluation, and this time it is for the evaluation of our training topics. And Matilda, you don't get much time to prepare the evaluation, but you've had a couple of evaluations in between, so I hope you're ready to evaluate our training topics session for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Matilda Fischer.
I'm evaluating Brian with his tech tip and not training.
You are indeed. I can't. Yes, that's your
do that if you want now.
No. Yes, if you would evaluate Brian's tech tips, that would be good.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Brian, for your wonderful presentation with lots of information and helpful tips where we should focus on when we are doing some on-site and combined with online meetings. It was a wonderful start when you were talking about September. I was thinking, wow, what's going on in September? And then you were talking about the showcase. But I was wondering the whole time, I knew about it, but I was wondering, when is it when he will give his real speech? Therefore, my suggestion would be to mention it, or perhaps even to hold up some kind of advertisement where you have the date when you're giving the speech again, or when the showcase is taking place. I already saw some advertisement, and that was already brilliant. So you could add a little bit more of those informations. And then I was really intrigued when you were talking about what complications would come up, like, for example, if you're in a loud place, then you would have this disturbing noises. And I would have found it quite interesting that you make that on your side. You could just take glass and hammer with something, so that we really experience what will those people experience when you are in a noisy surrounding. I think this could also be for people who have never experienced this before. It could be helpful to do that, and it would be very easy. Another thing that I was thinking of, we are all very familiar with Zoom and all the other platforms that are available, and you just mentioned Zoom. It could be also helpful to mention a little bit more of other platforms. And perhaps you could have those little icons like Zoom and GoToMeeting. They all have those icons which you recognize. You could have little pictures and show that, so people might recognize it later on, or give a little handout, or also perhaps on your homepage where you summarize a little bit which opportunities are there. On the other hand, you were using your hands very widely. That was really good. You were engaging with us through that, and you were giving us lots of useful information. Thank you for that, and I will give you your written evaluation later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathilde, for that evaluation of Brian's tech tips this evening. All right, time now for our Wordmaster / grammarian role. And Brian, have you been taking note of the flights of wonder and also the dives into the depths of appalling language that we might have had this evening, as well as, of course, the number of people using the word celebration?
Yes, I hope you can all read that. I will work from the back. I will work from the back and go forward. No, I'll go from the end backwards. Now this is words, but they weren't spoken. And Scott's slides there, where he has the green, the yellow, and the red. I would suggest that make the slides so that your face is not in front of the words that are showing. Because even though we know what they're saying, it would be a neat little trick to, start the word yellow, have yourself in the middle part, and then continue the word over on the other side. Rufid had a favorite word that he used, and that was so. Julian, a non-word word was your red nose. Michelle sprung one on me that I'm not sure that it's quite right, and that is so like so. Graham's vodcast, I didn't know of that word, but now I've heard the word, my podcast will become a vodcast. And yes, I have looked at the Yeti, and in fact, I bought one and took it back because it didn't work when I plugged it in. Other things that Graham left us with is time is our most valuable possession, and that is something that we need to think about, because in our whole life or in short periods of time like this meeting, it's important. And he did something different when he was reading. He read very fast, but I thought it was kind of like a boring way of reading what you were saying. And I would have been better if you'd have slowed it down, or you would have just summarized it better than repeat the whole thing. We covered Philip, and myself, I say hybrid. Michelle says blended, and I think that is a great opportunity for us to have a debate on what we should call these on-site online clubs. And as far as the word of the day, the winner is Mathilde, came in with 7. But Michelle was close behind with 6.
Thank you, Brian, and well done everybody who used the word of the day and who didn't do bad stuff with their language. I'm glad we don't have an R counter today because I suspect I've had more than my share. Our general evaluation today is to be presented by Julie Curtis. And Julie, if you would please give us an evaluation of the meeting as a whole and any other observations you care to make.
Our celebration meeting was highly informative, and I borrow words from some of you as I learned through the meeting. First of all, it was Brian telling us about the spectacular September showcase and what we need for a hybrid meeting. And he knows because I remember almost 3 years ago when I went to Royal Roads and we just begin to learn to be there and answer table topics. And at the beginning, we couldn't even speak, only look and listen. And then finally we were heard and listened. And I remember also when he spoke later in the university with the students, and we participated to that meeting completely, hybrid meeting. It was really interesting, but what I did not understand, why Mathilde was not the first evaluator, because if that speech was evaluated, it should have been the first, and then the other 2 evaluators came. So, and then Philip spoke and Summer evaluated in a big facilitated evaluation, which was great. I would add to it, because I was here last 2 times, that Philip's speech was inspiring speech, which was inspired by Brian's speech before about bicycles. And we inspire each other, and that is wonderful. And even I, who didn't speak now about bicycle, got an idea. And one day I will speak about an inspiration speech about bicycle when I was young also. So we really inspire each other, and that is wonderful. Now, Graham's presentation also made me remember a small thing I would like to add, that the Audacity software, which I remembered I used when I was stand-up comedian, gave me the audacity to make the small laugh big and long laughs. And I could do that with Audacity before I published it. So it is a very good tool. But I will never give so much money for a microphone. But it was a very interesting evaluation also by Philip. And thank you very much, Philip. You inspire me also every time, not only by speaking, but by facilitating and evaluating, and by how we listen, indeed, to each other, as Graham told. And yes, Graham was a wonderful Toastmaster of the meeting, and I liked very much how smooth she passed the president to the Toastmaster of the meeting. And I loved all those coat lights behind him, those colorful lights which we can see very easy, and we don't have to look at small things which he shows, whatever color they could be, because big screen there. Trainer topics. Michel Alba-Lim, as usually, was extremely resourceful and innovative, and I think all of us remember the award, for example, which is more in our soul, even if the award could be small, tiny, but it's something special which meant something to you. And all her questions were very good and very interesting answers. We all learned from each other today. And that is one of the big gain in plus, of course, of learning about the subjects we heard. And those were very interesting subjects indeed. Even if I will not use bicycle anymore, and I don't pay for, excuse me, Philip, I don't pay for any cause, because I worked for a cancer research cause and they used it for the family. So I don't believe now anymore why they use it, how they use it, and how it is controlled. But I am sure that you know those causes and you know how they use it well, because not all of them are swindlers. So we had an absolutely great meeting, and I am extremely happy to be able to facilitate the general evaluations.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for doing that general evaluation today. All right, as president, it is my duty now, or my honor, in fact, to ask for comments from any guests. Now, Samir, I keep forgetting that you're not a member of this club because I keep passing you at so many clubs. Samir, observations about the meeting, if you would be so kind.
I am absolutely delighted that I came today. When I first saw the notifications about the celebration of, I think it's the 1-year anniversary, is it, for chartering of Global Trainers Online, I said, I got to go, but I can't get up that early. And then when I woke up at 4 a.m. today, I said, oh, actually, I can go now. So I'm really glad that I came. I learned so many things. I love the regular practice of facilitated evaluations. I could see that it was a common practice because each of the evaluators slipped right into it, and it seems like everybody knew exactly what was going on, so it looked very smooth. And I thought that how appropriate for a club focused on training, because then we're all practicing the very practice of training, because we're training each other how to improve and to grow. That was wonderful. I loved the training topics. I thought that was it made me a little bit more nervous than I usually am about table topics, but it was wonderful to be able to step up to the plate and feel some of that uneasiness again. Really loved the club environment and the way things have gone. I was one of the first people that was interested, I think, when first starting up. And what I've seen today has made me think, I might want to switch my habits and make Saturday mornings an early rise for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samir. And you would be most welcome to join us for Eggs Benedict on a Saturday morning anytime that suits you. I can't promise you the Eggs Benedict. You'll have to do them for yourself, but seriously, great way to start the weekend. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a cause for celebration today. That is the reason that we have all been here. Now, I'm not sure whether this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a try. One of these buttons up here is, rats. The rotten thing is in the wrong place. Let me go. I've got so many windows open. And do you reckon I can reach the window that I want? No, because something's in the way. One of these is actually a song, which is what I was going to try and play. No, it's not going to work. Look, I give up.
Why did you sing it?
No,
Yeah.
I was going to,
You've got to sing it, Graham.
the times. Come on, yeah, that's the one. But I was going to play the dragon version, which is the Australian version. But no, I'll stop screen sharing because it's not going to work.
You've got to do it. You've got to do it.
Here we go. Here we go. I knew I'd find it sooner or later, and it was the last tab there. One more time with feeling. Here we go. Trying. And thank you, Dragon. Take it away, Mark Hunter. He's dead now, but hey, doesn't matter.
Need audio.
Oh, you're not getting audio?
No.
Ah.
There's the little clip.
Stop sharing and start sharing again with the option you clicked at the bottom.
Yeah, no, tried that. Didn't work. Oh, well, never mind.
Oh, wow.
We'll celebrate good times. Come on. Woohoo. All that stuff. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Michelle for her work in establishing this club and her dedication in getting it up and running in time for last year's convention. I'd like to thank all of the members of the club for being members of this club and for placing in me your trust as the incoming president. I'd like to thank you all for your contributions today, and I would like to see this year be a year of rebirth, regrowth, and more celebrations every time. So congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. We are officially 1 year old. Yay!
Yay! Woo!
Can I make a small announcement?
You may.
It'll take me a couple of seconds to share a screen with you.
Okay.
And there we are. The spectacular September showcase. It starts tomorrow, and we decided it will go for the whole month. So any club that wants to join in can join in if they have an online meeting, and it doesn't matter whether they're hybrid, 100% online. And this down below here is dates and times of the meetings and some nice advertising by different clubs that are having on occasions, including the one on September the 10th, where I will give my official version of the speech I just rehearsed. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Brian. Apparently, Mathilde couldn't see anything, but don't know. The September showcase, I think, is a great idea, and I know that a number of clubs are doing some interesting things. Some are just doing ordinary meetings, which is also fine. One of my club's online presenters is staging another competition, a webinar competition. So those of you who haven't seen that webinar competition, it's something that online presenters does. If you get the chance to go along, that could be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I have to work that day, and I really wanted to compete this year, but oh well, life's tough. But if you can make it to other clubs and help share the experience, and if you can let people who are unaware that we have online and or blended clubs know that such a beast exists, because I'm still surprised at the number of people who say to me, online clubs? What magic is this that you speak of? You know, the fact that I'm a member of 4 probably makes me a little unusual, but if you can share it around, let's do that. And of course, invite them to this club, particularly if they've got an interest in training, because training is what we do, and training is what we should continue to do. All right. That's it from me as your Toastmaster and as your President. I thank you for your attendance today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be leaving the meeting shortly because I have to go and prepare dinner and then go to bed because I start at stupid o'clock tomorrow morning.